It wasn't the kind of night that gave off red flags. Everything seemed calm, routine. Amelia and I were at Ramsey's, a dimly lit bar on the edge of town. It was one of those places with a vintage feel, polished wood counters, soft jazz playing between lively conversations. We were there with a mix of friends and some of Amelia's newer co-workers. I remember nursing a whiskey sour and watching Amelia chat with Lila, her closest friend. She had this way of lighting up a conversation, like she was the only person who mattered in the room. That's when I noticed Josh. He was one of her co-workers, a data analyst if I remembered right. I'd met him briefly at a company dinner a few months back. He wasn't overstepping, but something about their interaction didn't sit right with me. He leaned in just a little too close, his laugh a bit too eager. I shook it off. Amelia was naturally warm and friendly. I didn't want to let my imagination get the better of me. Later, Lila asked me to grab her a glass of rose while she headed to the restroom. When I came back, the table felt off. Amelia and Josh were both gone, their chairs empty, and the vibe had shifted. I set Lila's glass down and asked Eric, a mutual friend seated nearby, "Hey, did Amelia say anything about stepping out?" Eric hesitated, his eyes darting toward the door before answering. She mentioned needing some air. Josh went to take a call, I think. Maybe they're outside. That knot of unease in my stomach tightened. "I'll go check," I said casually, standing up to head toward the patio. The air outside was crisp, almost biting. I scanned the patio, then the parking lot, but there was no sign of her or Josh. After a few minutes of wandering between parked cars and feeling increasingly ridiculous, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out to see her name flashing on the screen. "Hey, babe," Amelia said, her voice light, almost too nonchalant. "You okay? Where are you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "You left without saying anything." "I just needed some fresh air," she said with a soft laugh, the kind that usually disarmed me. "Josh was out here too, so we started talking about some work stuff." "No big deal. Work stuff? At a bar in the middle of a party?" I bit back my irritation. "You could have let me know." "Don't be dramatic, Nathan," she said, her tone sharper now. "I'll be back inside in a second." And with that, she hung up. I stood there, the cold seeping through my jacket, phone still clutched in my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was talking to my wife. I felt like I was dealing with a stranger, someone who had perfected the art of brushing off questions and avoiding confrontation. Something didn't add up. Amelia came back inside about 10 minutes later, her smile wide and bright like nothing had happened. Josh trailed behind her, hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes darting away from mine. They returned to the table, and Amelia slid into her seat beside me. "Did you cool off?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. I stared at her, my drink untouched in front of me. "Where were you?" I asked quietly but firmly. She raised an eyebrow, tilting her head like I was the one acting out of line. "I told you I was outside. Josh was already there and we just talked. That's it." I glanced around the table. Lila avoided eye contact, and Eric busied himself with his drink. No one seemed willing to jump in. "Talked about what?" I pressed. "Work," she said, her smile unwavering. "You know how busy it's been lately." Josh, shifting uncomfortably in his seat, muttered something about needing another drink and slipped away to the bar. That was the final straw. "You disappeared," I said, my voice rising just enough to catch the attention of those nearby. "No text, no heads up. You left me sitting here like an idiot." Her smile faltered, replaced by a cold glare. "Don't be so dramatic, Nathan," she snapped. "I didn't think you'd care. You were busy talking to Eric. Do I need to check in with you every 5 minutes?" The weight of the moment settled heavily on me. It wasn't just what she was saying. It was how she said it. This wasn't a casual misunderstanding. It felt calculated, designed to make me doubt myself. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. "You're lying." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second before narrowing, her voice dropping to match mine. "Excuse me? You heard me?" I said, my tone steady. You're lying, Amelia. I don't know what you're trying to pull, but I'm not blind. For the briefest moment, her mask slipped. Her expression hardened, her jaw tightening as though she was ready to lash out. But then, just as quickly, the mask was back, her smile colder than ever. You're paranoid, she said, standing abruptly and grabbing her coat. If you can't trust me, that's on you, Nathan. I'm done with this conversation. And just like that, she turned to Lila. Coming? Lila hesitated, glancing at me before grabbing her purse and following Amelia out the door. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the empty space where Amelia had been. Around me, the low hum of the bar continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, muted conversations. But I couldn't focus on any of it. My drink sat untouched, the ice slowly melting into a watered-down mess. Eric finally broke the silence, clearing his throat awkwardly. Hey man, maybe you should head home. You don't look so great. I nodded absently, barely hearing him. My chest felt tight, my thoughts racing in 100 different directions. How had we gotten here? How had Amelia gone from the woman I trusted most in the world to someone who could lie to my face without blinking? I didn't go straight home. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The anger was there, hot, insistent, but beneath it lurked something colder, doubt. This wasn't the first time Amelia's behavior had raised questions in my mind. For weeks, I'd noticed small things. The way she angled her phone away from me when a message came in, the new coworkers whose names seemed to multiply overnight, the sudden late nights at work that she brushed off as busy season. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was being insecure, paranoid even. But tonight she crossed a line. When I finally drove home, the house felt colder, emptier than usual. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and I didn't bother calling her. I already knew she wouldn't answer. Inside, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat in the darkened living room, replaying every detail of the night in my mind. Her dismissive tone, Josh's awkward retreat, the way Lila looked at me with something close to pity. And then there was the moment she called me dramatic. That word played on a loop in my head, needling at my pride. Was I overreacting? No, I wasn't. As the hours ticked by, I found myself staring at her laptop, half closed on the kitchen counter. Normally, I would have respected her privacy. But this wasn't normal, was it? I hesitated, guilt flickering briefly in my chest. Then I remembered her tone on the phone earlier. So smug, so dismissive. I opened the laptop. The screen was locked, of course. But Amelia had never been one for changing passwords. I typed in Oliver 2013, the name of our dog and the year we adopted him. The screen unlocked. Her browser history was clean. Too clean. No social media. No shopping sites. Not even a Google search. It was as if she'd wiped everything recently, and the thought sent a chill down my spine. I opened her email next. At first, it seemed innocuous. Work reminders, store promotions, a couple of forwarded newsletters. But then I saw a name that stopped me cold. Josh M. I clicked on the thread, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The subject line was casual, follow-up, but the content was anything but. Can't stop thinking about earlier. Wish we had more time. Let me know when you're free. It was sent earlier today, just before we'd left for the bar. My stomach twisted as I scrolled up, reading months' worth of exchanges between them. They weren't outright explicit, but the undertone was unmistakable. Inside jokes, compliments, plans to grab drinks after work. And then there were the photos. Amelia in a dress I'd never seen before, leaning against the bar at what looked like an upscale lounge. Josh standing next to her, his hand resting on her lower back. It was all there, laid out in black and white. Proof. When I heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway, my pulse quickened. Amelia walked in a moment later, heels clicking against the tile as she set her purse down on the counter. She glanced at me and froze, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in the beer in my hand and the laptop on the coffee table. "You're still up?" she asked, her tone light, but there was an edge of something else. Caution, maybe? I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up the laptop and turned the screen toward her. "Josh," I said, my voice cold. "Care to explain?" Her face went pale. For a moment, she stood completely still, like a deer caught in headlights. Then she laughed. A brittle, forced sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, come on, Nathan," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's not what you think. Josh is just a friend. We've been working on this big project together, and sometimes we grab a drink to unwind. That's all." I stared at her, my disbelief cutting through the air like a knife. A friend? A friend doesn't send emails like this. I turned the laptop back toward myself and read aloud. "Can't stop thinking about earlier. Wish we had more time." Her mask slipped then, her smile fading into something sharper. "You went through my laptop?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "Are you serious right now? Don't you dare try to flip this on me," I said, standing up. "How long has this been going on, Amelia? How long have you been lying to me?" Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite place. Anger, guilt, maybe even fear. "You're being ridiculous, Nathan. There's nothing going on between us. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I took a step closer, lowering my voice to a deadly calm. "If it's nothing, why delete your browser history? Why hide this from me? Tell me the truth, Amelia. I deserve that much." Her expression hardened, the walls going up. "I don't have to explain myself to you," she said, turning on her heel and heading toward the bedroom. "I'm done with this conversation." As the door slammed behind her, I stood there, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it, no matter what it took. I didn't sleep that night. The house felt too quiet, too heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. Amelia had locked herself in the bedroom, leaving me to stew alone in the living room. The laptop sat on the coffee table like a ticking time bomb, its glowing screen mocking me with the damning emails I'd uncovered. By the time dawn broke, I had resolved to figure out the whole truth. If Amelia wasn't going to tell me, I'd have to find out myself. The first step was her phone. She had left it charging in the kitchen, and I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. It was locked, of course, but I already knew the passcode, her birthday. My hands were shaking as I typed it in, the screen unlocking to reveal her neatly organized apps. Messages. That's where I started. At first glance, everything seemed normal: chats with Lila, a few group threads with her coworkers, the occasional exchange with her mom. But then I noticed a thread with no name, just a single emoji. A red heart. I opened it, my pulse pounding in my ears. The messages were brief but intimate. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. I needed that. You make everything feel so easy." The most recent message, sent just hours ago, read, "Still thinking about you. Call me when you can." It was from Josh. My grip tightened on the phone as I scrolled through the thread, my heart sinking with every word. There were photos too. Amelia and Josh at a restaurant I didn't recognize, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Another of them in what looked like a park, her head tilted back in laughter as he leaned in, his hand brushing her arm. Every image felt like a punch to the gut. I heard movement from the bedroom and quickly put the phone back on the counter, my mind racing. Amelia walked into the kitchen a moment later, her hair tousled, her face pale. She didn't say anything as she poured herself a glass of water, avoiding my gaze. "Morning," I said, my voice tight. "Morning," she replied, her tone clipped. We stood there in silence for a long moment before I finally spoke again. "I looked at your messages." Her hand froze on the glass, her knuckles turning white. Slowly, she set it down and turned to face me. "You did what?" "You heard me?" I said, crossing my arms. "I saw the messages, Amelia, between you and Josh, the photos, everything." Her expression hardened, her jaw tightening as she folded her arms across her chest. "You had no right to invade my privacy, and you had no right to lie to me." I shot back. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been sneaking around behind my back? She opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. For a brief moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then she straightened, her expression shifting into something colder. "It's not what you think," she said, her voice steady but devoid of emotion. "Josh and I are just friends. Those messages, they're nothing. You're reading too much into this." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Friends? That's the best you can come up with? Friends don't send each other messages like that. Friends don't delete their browser history or sneak off to the patio together at a party. Just tell me the truth, Amelia." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You're being paranoid, Nathan. This is exactly why I didn't want to say anything. You always blow things out of proportion. Don't gaslight me." I snapped, my voice rising. "I know what I saw, Amelia. Stop pretending like I'm imagining things." Her eyes flashed with anger, and for a moment, I thought she might lash out. But instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door to the bedroom behind her. I stood there, breathing heavily, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. She thought she could stonewall me, that I would back down and let this go. But she was wrong. I grabbed my keys and left the house, needing to clear my head. That afternoon, I sat in my car outside Amelia's office. It was a small, modern building in the heart of the city, with glass windows that reflected the late morning sun. I'd never done anything like this before, never felt the need to, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I watched as people came and went, my eyes scanning the faces of her coworkers. And then I saw him, Josh. He walked out of the building with a group of people, laughing at something one of them said. He looked ordinary. Average height, sandy blonde hair, a pressed shirt that was slightly too big. But the sight of him made my blood boil. I waited until he was alone, standing by his car and scrolling through his phone. Then I got out of my car and approached him. "Josh," I called, my voice firm. He looked up, startled, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Yeah? Do I know you?" "You know my wife," I said, stepping closer. "Amelia." His face changed in an instant, his casual demeanor slipping into something more guarded. "Oh, yeah, I work with her. Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay," I said, my voice low. "I know about you too. The messages, the photos. So don't stand here and act like nothing's going on." Josh blinked, his jaw tightening. "Look, I don't know what you think you know, but..." "Save it," I interrupted. "Just tell me the truth. How long has this been going on?" He hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Amelia and I..." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice sharp. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Fine. A few months. But it's not what you think. It's not serious." "Not serious?" I repeated, my anger flaring. "You've been sneaking around with my wife for months, and you think that makes it okay?" Josh didn't respond, his expression guarded. I stepped closer, my fists clenched. "Stay away from her. Do you understand me?" He nodded, muttering something under his breath before getting into his car and driving off. As I watched him go, my anger gave way to something heavier, darker. The truth was out now, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made everything worse. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Amelia's car was in the driveway, but the usual hum of her movements, the soft clinking of dishes, the faint melody of her favorite playlist, was absent. I stepped inside, half expecting her to be waiting for me in the living room, ready with another set of excuses. Instead, I found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone in her hands. She looked up as I walked in, her expression unreadable. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice neutral. "Out," I replied shortly, tossing my keys onto the dresser. Her gaze narrowed slightly. "Out where?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talking to Josh." Her reaction was immediate, a sharp intake of breath, her posture stiffening. You did what? You heard me? I said, my voice cold. I went to his office, had a little chat. He admitted everything, Amelia. So, are you still going to lie to me? Or are you finally going to tell me the truth? For a moment, she said nothing, her hands tightening around her phone. Then she stood, her expression hardening. You had no right to do that, she said, her voice trembling with anger. This is between us. You had no business dragging him into it. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I shot back, stepping closer. You're the one who lied. You're the one who betrayed me. And now you're angry because I confronted the guy you've been sneaking around with? Are you serious right now? Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing with defiance. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. Then make me understand, I snapped. Explain to me how the woman I've been married to for 8 years could do this. Explain to me why you thought it was okay to lie, to cheat, to throw everything we built away like it meant nothing. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said quietly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at her, my chest tightening. So it did happen. You cheated on me. She flinched at the word but didn't deny it. It wasn't about you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was about me. I felt lost, trapped. And Josh, he made me feel alive again. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Alive, I repeated, my voice shaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just hurt me, Amelia. You destroyed everything. For what? A fling with some guy from work. She looked away, tears welling in her eyes. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't want it to end like this. End? I asked bitterly. You ended this the moment you decided to lie to me. You ended this the moment you chose him over us. Her tears spilled over then, and she sank back onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I stood there, my anger warring with the deep, crushing sense of betrayal that had settled over me. There's nothing you can say, I said finally. Not now. I spent the next few days in a haze, barely eating, barely sleeping. Amelia tried to talk to me a few times, but I couldn't bring myself to listen. Every time I looked at her, all I could see were the messages, the photos, the lies. By the 4th day, I knew I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I packed a bag and booked a room at a nearby hotel, leaving without telling her where I was going. I needed space. I needed time to figure out what came next. At the hotel, I found myself scrolling through photos on my phone. Pictures of us from happier times. Vacations, family gatherings, lazy Sunday mornings. It felt like I was looking at someone else's life, someone else's marriage. I wanted to believe we could fix this, that somehow we could put the pieces back together. But the more I thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Amelia. Nathan, please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, I typed out a response. There's nothing left to talk about. Her reply came almost instantly. Please, just one more chance. I'll do anything. I didn't respond. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. This time, from an unknown number. Curious, I opened the message.
Enoughin.
This is Erica, Josh's wife. I think we need to talk. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even considered that Josh might have a family of his own. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond, before typing out a simple reply. Okay, when and where? I met Erica at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She was already seated when I arrived, a tall woman with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked tired, her face pale and drawn, as if she hadn't slept in days. Nathan? She asked as I approached the table. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. Thanks for meeting me. She gave a small, tight smile. I almost didn't. I wasn't sure what to say. Neither was I admitted. For a moment, we sat in awkward silence, the weight of what had brought us together pressing down on both of us. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers, placing them on the table between us. "These," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "are emails between Josh and Amelia. I found them a few weeks ago. I thought I was going crazy, but now—" She trailed off, her eyes searching mine for some kind of reassurance. I picked up the papers, scanning the pages quickly. They were worse than I'd expected. Intimate, explicit, and filled with plans for nights I hadn't even known about. "How long have you known?" I asked, setting the papers back down. She sighed, her hands twisting in her lap. "About a month. I confronted Josh, but he swore it was over. He promised me it was a mistake, that he wasn't going to see her again. I wanted to believe him, but—" She gestured to the papers. "I guess I was wrong." I nodded, the knot in my stomach tightening. "I know how you feel. Amelia's been lying to me for months. And now—" My voice trailed off as the enormity of it all hit me again. Erica leaned forward, her expression hardening. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't stay with her. Not after this." She nodded slowly. "I feel the same way about Josh. But there's one thing I think you should know." "What's that?" Her jaw tightened, and she looked away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "They've been planning to leave. Together. Josh has been talking about transferring to another branch of his company. He didn't say much, but I saw enough to know Amelia was a part of the plan." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. "Are you sure?" She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I wish I wasn't." I drove home in a daze, Erica's words echoing in my mind. They'd been planning to leave. How long had they been talking about it? How far had they gotten? When I got to the house, Amelia was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I walked in, her expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Nathan," she said, standing up. "You're back." I didn't respond, my gaze fixed on her. "Were you planning to leave?" Her face paled, and her phone slipped from her hands, landing on the couch. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice cold. "I spoke to Erica. She told me everything. You and Josh were planning to leave together, weren't you?" Amelia's mouth opened and closed like she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she sank back onto the couch, her head in her hands. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "Then tell me what it was like," I demanded. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Josh, he talked about leaving, about starting over somewhere new. I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I wanted to. But you considered it," I said, my voice shaking. "You were going to leave me. You were going to throw away everything we built together for him." "I didn't know what to do," she cried, her voice breaking. "I was confused. I was lost. I didn't want to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "You didn't want to hurt me? Amelia, you've been hurting me for months. Every lie, every text, every secret meeting, it was all a knife to the back. And now you're trying to tell me you didn't know what to do." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands again. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." But her apology meant nothing. "Not now. Not after everything. I can't do this anymore," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I can't keep pretending like we can fix this. You made your choice, Amelia, and now I'm making mine." Her head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "Nathan, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." But it was too late. I turned and walked out the door, the sound of her sobs fading behind me. That night, I checked into another hotel, my heart heavy with the weight of finality. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. My marriage was over. As I sat in the quiet of the room, staring out at the city lights, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my relationship with Amelia. It was the end of the life I thought I knew. And now I had to figure out how to start over. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was floating through a life that wasn't my own. I spent most of my time at the hotel, avoiding calls and messages from Amelia. She left voicemail after voicemail, her tone shifting from desperation to anger to tearful apologies. But I didn't listen to most of them. Couldn't. I met with a lawyer 2 days after leaving the house. The conversation was clinical, detached. Words like assets, division, and irreconcilable differences filled the air as I signed papers that officially started the process of ending my marriage. It was both liberating and devastating. The night before I was scheduled to meet with Amelia to discuss logistics, my phone buzzed with a new text. It was from Erica. Did she tell you about the apartment? I stared at the message for a long time before replying. What apartment? Her response came almost immediately. Josh rented it a month ago. I found the lease in his email. It's under his name, but they've both been there. My stomach twisted as I typed out another message. Where is it? She sent the address, along with a brief note. Do what you need to do. The apartment was on the other side of town, tucked away in a modern complex with sleek glass windows and a gated entrance. I parked across the street, sitting in my car for what felt like hours, staring at the building. Finally, I got out and walked toward the entrance. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced at me as I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt endless. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into a quiet hallway, the sound of my footsteps echoing against the walls. I found the door, 402, and stood there for a long moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then, summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I knocked. It took a few moments, but eventually, the door opened. Amelia stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. Nathan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I pushed past her into the apartment, my gaze sweeping over the small, modern space. It was sparsely furnished, a couch, a coffee table, a few framed pictures on the walls. But it was unmistakably theirs. There were 2 wine glasses on the counter, an open bottle of red sitting next to them. A jacket I didn't recognize was draped over the back of a chair. How long? I asked, my voice low and cold. Amelia closed the door behind her, her hands trembling. Nathan, please, let me explain. How long? I repeated, turning to face her. She swallowed hard, tears streaming down her face. A few months, she whispered. I nodded, the confirmation hitting me like a punch to the gut. So this is it? This is what you threw our life away for? It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did, I said, my voice sharp. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're standing here, crying, acting like you're the victim. I made a mistake, she sobbed. I know I did, but I love you, Nathan. I never stopped loving you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Love? You don't betray someone you love, Amelia. You don't destroy their trust and then expect them to forgive you. She reached out, her hands trembling as she tried to touch my arm. Please, let me make it right. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me one more chance. I stepped back, out of her reach. You had your chance, I said quietly, and you ruined it. Her sobs grew louder as she sank to the floor, burying her face in her hands. I stared at her for a long moment, my chest aching with a mix of anger and heartbreak. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Amelia tried to fight it at first, begging me to reconsider, but eventually, she signed the papers. I sold the house, moved into a small apartment closer to work, and started rebuilding my life piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Some days, the weight of everything felt unbearable. But little by little, I found a way forward. Erica and I stayed in touch for a while, bonded by the shared betrayal we'd endured. She divorced Josh not long after I left Amelia, and the last I heard, she'd moved to another state to start fresh. As for Amelia, I don't know where she is now. Part of me still wonders if she ever thinks about what she lost, if she ever regrets the choices she made. But I've stopped looking for answers. I've stopped waiting for closure, because sometimes the only way to move forward is to let go.